Welcome to the wonderful world of noun clauses. As I mentioned in the other video, I think that this chapter is a little bit confusing in its description and explanation of noun clauses. And so I wanted to just kind of go through things again with the cheat sheet with some examples, and hopefully this will clarify things as you're doing your assignment and quizzes this week. So to start with the very basic, a noun clause is composed of a subject and a verb. That looks really familiar. There could be other stuff, and often there is, but the two essential components are the subject and the verb. And this phrase takes the place and functions the same as a noun in a sentence. Up to this point in the semester, we've been looking at simple nouns, which are composed of one or maybe two words at the most. And now we're replacing those with an entire phrase. Keep in mind that noun clauses are a dependent clause. In other words, they're an incomplete sentence. You can't take them out of the sentence, put them by themselves, and have them make sense. They're going to feel unfinished. So they need to be part of a larger sentence. Remember that they can be replaced by three words: it, something, or someone. And this is a helpful thing to do as you're getting a feel for noun clauses. Once you've identified the noun clause, decide based on the context which one of these words can replace the noun clause, that phrase. And that will help you identify it and see how it's functioning, and will hopefully help you as you diagram as well. So noun clauses can function as different parts of speech. And it's helpful if you look at your sentence pattern cheat sheet. Anywhere you see a noun on here, it can be replaced by a noun clause. So obviously all of these subjects are nouns, and then we have a few that have nouns in other places in the sentence in the predicates. 3 and 5 have subjective complements that are nouns pointing back to the subject. Those can be replaced by phrases. Direct objects and indirect objects can also be noun clauses. And then this objective complement down here at the bottom can also be a noun phrase. So it helps me to have this really simplified visual in front of me, because there's a lot going on with noun clauses. If you can keep this simple picture in mind and see where things are, how they're functioning, and how they're relating to other parts of the sentence, it really helps simplify things mentally, and especially as you're diagramming. Okay, so let's go through the parts of speech that they can replace or function as. The first one, and the basic one, is a subject. We know that the subject's the main part of the sentence. It's what's connected to the verb or doing the action of the verb if it is an action verb. It can be any sentence pattern. Obviously, sentences have to have a subject. So the example here is whoever rang the doorbell has disappeared. We have this phrase functioning as the subject, and then we have our verb following. And we can do our substitution test here as well and say that someone has disappeared, and that still makes sense. It's grammatically correct, and so we can see that this is functioning as a noun. The second thing it can function as is a subjective complement, and that's in patterns 3 and 5, where we have that noun at the end of the sentence that is referring back to or clarifying the subject of the sentence. Again, this is kind of technical jargon, but I want you especially to understand the function of what's going on here. So subjective complement can be sentence patterns 3 and 5. The example here is the question was, so we have subject verb, and then whether or not we should arrive early. This is defining, clarifying the subject of question, this entire phrase. So it's serving as the subjective complement. And here you could replace it with something. The question was something, and it would make grammatical sense. The next noun that we could identify is the direct object. We've looked at direct and indirect objects a lot with our transitive and intransitive verbs. So direct objects are in sentences 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then we have the indirect objects also in sentence pattern 8. So that is the noun that's receiving the direct action of the verb without any interceding prepositions, either stated or implied. So the example here is we wondered if the train had arrived. We wondered what? We wondered something. That again helps me identify a direct object. If I can ask a question of the verb, we wondered what, and then you can reply with a direct answer. So there's a noun clause functioning as a direct object. Closely related to that is the indirect object. Same thing, we have a noun and a predicate, but we usually have this preposition. The most common ones are to, for, and of. So that would be sentence pattern number 8. The example here is, you should give whoever sells the most a bonus. The easier way to think of this is to rewrite the sentence and say, you should give a bonus, which is the direct object, to whoever sells the most. And then you get the sense of the preposition being in there. So we have the whoever sells the most, that noun clause functioning as an indirect object. Next, we have the objective complement, and that is going to be sentence pattern number 10, where we have a direct object following an action verb, and then this noun refers back to, clarifies that direct object that's in the predicate. So the example here is, Sherry considered the bribe as what was necessary. The key to that is you have as, or you can substitute a to be and have it make sense. And this one you could say, Sherry considered the bribe as something. Again, you can replace it with that one single noun, so you know that it's operating as a noun clause. The last two that don't really fit into specific sentence patterns are objective prepositions and an appositive. So let's talk about that. We know we've harped on prepositions ad nauseum this semester. So we know that a prepositional phrase is a preposition plus a noun. So in this case, we have a preposition plus a noun phrase. Keep in mind that the preposition is not part of the noun clause. The preposition is part of the main part of the sentence. So when you're diagramming, that's going to make a big difference. The example here is, I asked for help from who, and that should be whomever, my bad, from whomever could afford a donation. I asked for help from is our preposition, and we could say someone, and that would be, so this entire thing is the prepositional phrase, from whomever could afford a donation. And then this is the actual noun clause that you would diagram as a noun clause, and we'll get to diagramming in just a second. The last one is a new term for you, and it sounds kind of technical and complicated, but it's really not a big deal. And a positive is a noun that's right next to something that it renames or identifies. So it's clarifying something, and it usually is set off from the sentence by commas on either side of it. Again, this can be in any sentence pattern, and it's one of those things, if you have commas on either side, you can usually take it out and it won't change the meaning of the sentence. An example is, your decision what to have for lunch is not very important. So we could take that noun clause out, and the sentence would read, your decision is not very important. Makes sense. This little appositive in here is just to clarify what decision we're talking about. And keep in mind, when you are diagramming appositives, they go inside parentheses to show that it's really just a clarification and it's not essential to the meaning of the sentence. The last thing we need you to know is the words that noun clauses are introduced by, and there's two categories. The first one is interrogatives, which is a fancy way of saying a word which implies a question. And I refer you here to our parts of speech cheat sheet. So if you look at the cheat sheet that I gave you right at the beginning of the semester, we have these questions: which one, how many, what kind, how, when, where. So that might help clarify things a little bit. So you have who, whomever, etc. And these are diagrammed as nouns because they're answering questions that clarify nouns. Which and whose are under the adjective category. When, where, why, and how are diagrammed as adverbs. And keep in mind that this is part of the noun clause. So when we're talking about diagrammed as nouns, it's going to fall in the noun category. If it's an adjective, it's going to go under the noun line. And if it's diagrammed as an adverb, it's going to go under the verb or the word it's modifying. So that's what those mean. The second category is expletives. Again, a fancy word, but it's just this idea of a word that's connecting and implying a relationship. And the four that we're going to be encountering are if, that, whether, and whether or not. And you'll see these in the example. They're diagrammed above the verb of the noun clause, and they have a dotted line connecting them to the main line of the clause. Keep in mind that noun clauses are going to be on pedestals. I know that pedestals with prepositional phrases have caused us some grief, but in a way, this is a lot more clear cut. If it's a noun clause, it goes on a pedestal. And then depending on what the function it is performing is where it's going to go. So do your exercises in the book, do your examples or your exercises from the course, and hopefully this will start to make a lot more sense. I find that this especially is once you actually do it, it starts to become a lot more clear. If you have questions, if you need further clarification, please let me know and we can go over this again and do some more examples together.